It's the top of the line of the top of the line for Jeep. This ain't no CJ. Let's drive the 2014 Jeep Grand Cherokee Summit and check the tech. You can spot a 2014 Grand Cherokee by the face, revised rather notably. But beyond that, the Grand Cherokee carries on as something of the American Land Rover. Big, clean, and bold, without a lot of that World War II bric-a-brac that doesn't make a lot of sense to buyers under 40 anymore. Except for some little tiny since 1941 call-outs you'll find on the headlights and the steering wheel. They just can't help themselves. Now, right as you get inside this guy, you realize it's about as spacious as you thought it was going to be as you approached its bulkiness walking to it. Plenty of good headroom, and I'm not even nearly at the bottom of the seat travel. As you can see, this isn't the CJ Jeep of back in the day. This has become the biggest bourgeois rock crawler in the market, but they're meant to be luxurious. That's what Grand Cherokees do in the Jeep lineup. Let's get right to our center stack technology. This is what you probably noticed right off the bat in this very nicely, almost too nicely appointed cabin. This is a Garmin-oriented nav system to begin with. You recognize that right away because it has the familiar where to. That's Garmin language. It's rated as one of the easiest to use in the entire auto industry. Once you do get your navigation set or just browsing the map, it's one of the nicer looking ones. Street names are always quite legible, as are the legends for traffic and such, or direction of street. It's a little doughy and a little bit soft, but once you zoom in well enough, you can read it very well. On to the media now. AM and FM radio both have HD radio, and it's well documented here. You've got an HD button indicator there on the right, and once you get into the FM HD, where you often will find secondary or even tertiary stations, it's very easy to bounce between them. You just hit next, and it goes from HD1 to HD2. Sirius XM, of course, satellite radio standard on this car as well, does a really nice job of calling out that particular kind of media with good channel art, great meta tags, and they use all the real estate. I almost rarely see a station name or a title that has to rotate or go, piece by piece. Now, like old school thinking, they still put media under a separate bucket, and that's where you'll find your iPod connection. SD card is one you're probably not going to use so often, but again, meta and album art do a good job, as good as you did on the card. And of course, Bluetooth streaming with meta tag information again. You've also got an aux jack, and by the way, all that stuff lives down here in this bin in the front. In the back, there are two more USB jacks, but don't get excited. Those are not for media. Those are USB charging jacks. A few more technology touches I want to call your attention to before we go to the hood. Interesting, very electronic, very modern, very non-Jeep, to be honest, shifter down here that controls the 8-speed automatic. Now, down here are your drivetrain control systems and what's a fairly ambitious and sophisticated undercarriage, because we have the four-wheel drive version. Not all of these are. This is honestly kind of taken out of a page from Land Rover that had this thing pretty early on, but you just rotate the knob and it does all the thinking for you for setting up how the four-wheel drive works, from snow to sand to let it figure out as conditions change, and then we have mud and rock. You also see how the air suspension has different ride heights. You can invoke those if you want. In fact, the levels go from entry exit, which the car only does when it's parked, to aero for being on the highway, to off-road 1 and off-road 2, high and higher. And then you can push it into four-wheel drive low right here. That, by the way, is even lower than it used to be on the Grand Cherokee. Now a 44-to-1 low range ratio. Super crawl on that guy. And you've also got descent control right here to get down a hill using its smarts and not your foot. Last bit of cool tech in this cabin is the center display on the instrument panel. Notice we've got a tach on the left, temp, and fuel gauges on the right. Those are all real gauges, mechanical, but in the middle there is an LCD, as is current fashion on higher trim cars. You connect apps. Now, not a lot going on here yet. You've got Bing search, a bunch of remote telematics you can do from your smartphone, and a hotspot, which functions as proof that car makers want a piece of the mobile bandwidth explosion. It costs anywhere from $10 a day to $35 a month to activate the Jeep's built-in hotspot. And when you do, it's only 3G. Now, the first thing I notice when I get in the engine bay without reading a single spec is that I know there's a Hemi V8 option, because you got about enough room in front of this V6 to put one of those micro apartments they're doing these days. So yes, you can get 2 more cylinders on the front. That's another video. We have the 3.6-liter variable valve train V6, one of their Pentastar motors. This guy doesn't do any particular trickery, but delivers 290 horsepower, 260 foot-pounds of torque. good enough to move this basically 5,000-pound vehicle up to 60 in about 7.5 seconds while delivering, not bad, 1724 mpg in 4x4 trim. What's also interesting to me is there's a diesel, a turbo diesel option for the first time on this guy. It's an Italian motor sourced by, you know, the parent company of Chrysler, Fiat, but it adds $5,000 to the sticker price. Even though it gets up to 30 on the highway, I couldn't earn that back in my lifetime. Now, around town where you're going to spend 99% of your time in this Jeep, the driving is, it's a truck. You don't forget that. Between the kind of numb throttle response, the bouncy jouncy ride, and the thing you don't find anymore on a lot of vehicles, which is high profile tires, relatively so. This is like driving one of those foam pillows. Power is great. This is a really nice V6 engine, and it comes on really well, but it's blanketed in a bunch of other BS that just tends to mute its responses. Sport mode does wonders to cure a lot of that, but it's actually too high-strung for most drivers to use every day. It holds the gear a really long time, and it's going to piss you off because it's just too much noise and too much whirring going on unless you're really into it, and then the suspension lets you down, so there's no happy medium in this thing. Now, we have adaptive cruise control, which also has a forward collision warning, which will get in there and mitigate the crash. You activate that just by turning on cruise, and then you have these two buttons here that rather cartoonily show you distance greater or distance less. And if I set this right here, and I set my speed, and I set my distance, it seems to be very well reading the road in front of me. But I gotta tell you, in the end, driving this Grand Cherokee, I just feel like I took a nice off-road vehicle and I suburbanized it too much. It's been defanged. Maybe that's just me, but I think an off-road vehicle with this kind of credentials should be a little more pure instead of swaddled in all this stuff. But this is America. Who am I kidding? Doing up a Grand Cherokee CNET style is pretty easy. Just bring 52 grand. You order the Summit trim level that we have at about $49,000, and then add four-wheel drive for $3,000 more. Skip nonsense like the optional backseat Blu-ray system, and tell your kids to just roll down the window. That thing out there is called a tree.